Welcome to our Reflective Information channel, sponsored by Reflective Incorporated, the visibility company. This is the second video in our three-part series on the invention and history of reflective tape. Part 1 of this series covered inventions that formed the building blocks for the creation of both glass bead-based and prismatic reflective tapes. The next two inventions would be the most important of these building blocks. In the year 1928, Jonathan Cass Stimson, a United States inventor, created and filed for a patent on his cube corner reflector array. This retro-reflective array was and is used in a variety of Stimsonite products, with road markers being the most prominent. If you look at the original drawings in his patent, you can clearly see that his triple mirror cubed corner prism is the same array used to this very day for a multitude of reflective devices and products. The reflectors were originally made with glass, and then transitioned to plastic, most likely because of ease of manufacturing and lower costs. After filing for his patent, he formed a company called Stimsonite, a name that to this day is very well known in the traffic safety industry. Stimsonite retro reflectors were widely used on automobile taillights, highway signs, guardrails, railroad signals, airport runways, marine navigational markers, bicycles, and more. Stimsonite is also credited with the invention of the modern cube corner-raised pavement markers that we see on roads today. These markers are still manufactured by Stimsonite and are still used on modern roadways. Note, decades after their original invention and patent, Stimsonite would be the second company in the U.S. to develop prismatic sign sheeting. This invention integrated their prismatic array into a flexible, adhesive-backed film. In the early 1930s, large glass beads that reflected light already existed. During that time, Rudolph Potter's company, Potter's Beads, began creating perfectly round, high-clarity glass spheres that were a fraction of a millimeter in diameter. Like the larger beads, when a beam of light entered the microsphere, it would change direction as it entered, bounce off the backside of the bead, and then bend one more time as it made its way back out of the bead and to the light source. It would do this no matter which direction the light came in from, and if multiple sources of light were shined on the beads, the spheres would return light back to each source. Microscopic glass beads that reflected light opened up several invention opportunities, all of which changed the world of nighttime visibility. The tiny beads that Potter's Beads created were initially used to light up cinema screens, and were later used to add to the surface of painted lines on roadways so that the lines would reflect car headlights and light up a bright white or yellow at night. To this day, Potter's Beads continues to be the world's largest producer of microglass beads, and their reflective beads are still used for highway lines and in airports all over the world. The beginning of modern reflective traffic signs. From road stripes to reflective signs. Before there were reflective signs, there were reflective road stripes. Glass beads from Potter's were distributed on wet paint to make them reflective at night. At night, a stop sign could not be seen, but a stop bar covered with glass beads was clearly visible. And this did not go unnoticed. The history of modern-day reflective traffic signs began in 1937, when a 3M employee was tasked with the job of creating a new and better method for making reflective center lines for roads in the state of Minnesota. The goal was to make a tape that gave the same effect as the method used at the time, which was simply dropping glass beads on wet paint. Basically, the goal was to create a roll of road striping. The employee's name was Harry Heltzer. In any event, Heltzer accepted the job of developing this new product and set about trying to determine how to make it work. A highway official suggested that he embed glass beads into a stripe, giving him the idea of a glass bead-based reflective tape for pavement. His first mission was to source glass beads that were retro-reflective and small enough to be embedded into a carrier such as a tape. Mr. Heltzer used double-sided tape with an adhesive top and bottom and embedded the beads on one side. The other side would be used to adhere the stripe to a road. What Heltzer created did in fact reflect and did create a reflective stripe on pavement. The issue, however, was keeping the stripe adhered to a cold Minnesota roadway and keeping it reflective for a long period of time. Basically, for the product to be commercially viable, it had to work as well as reflective paint. So the invention worked, but not well enough to be used commercially. But all was not lost. While this first attempt at making reflective road striping on a roll did not pan out, it did lead to another amazing invention that changed nighttime safety forever. For the record, 3M did not give up on reflective road striping, and later on in 1974, patented a product that we now know as Staymark. Reflective road stripes on a roll. Harry Heltzer and his team, with the knowledge and experience gained from reflective road striping in hand, began development of a new invention that would soon evolve into a product known as engineer-grade reflective sign sheeting. A product used to this day. The idea was to take the road stripe idea that did not perform as hoped and transfer it to a sign where road wear was not a factor. In any event, the invention began as a fairly crude product that was functional but with drawbacks, three of which were wet reflectivity, dirt and grime on the beads, and an overall reflectivity deficit. In the first iterations of the new product, glass beads were simply embedded into the surface of a film and left exposed so they could reflect light. This was much like the road striping product where the beads were exposed on top of double stick tape. The film was then placed on a sign. The reflective sheeting worked somewhat. However, when dirt got between the beads or when it rained, the beads stopped returning light in amounts sufficient to see. And overall, even without these issues, the brightness was disappointing. So in summary, in early iterations, reflectivity achieved was low. And in rain or when the sheeting accumulated dirt and grime, it was even lower. This experimentation was a good beginning, but further improvements were definitely needed before it was commercially viable. So Heltzer and his team went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and worked on solving these issues. They needed the tape to be brighter, it needed to reflect in all weather conditions, and lastly, the beads needed a way to stay clean. Note, a single glass bead will reflect by itself on pretty much any surface. When applied in a large area, the apparent reflectivity greatly increases since all the beads are returning light together. When on a light-colored background, they do even better. But on a mirrored background, like metallic silver, they reflect the best. And this is what the team discovered. To increase the return of light, 3M created a base layer or background on a film that was a silver color, like what you would find on the back of a mirror. Perfectly round glass beads were applied to this silver surface with half the bead embedded and half exposed. In essence, the silver backing transformed the back of the glass bead into a mirror. And not just any mirror, because the shape of the bead also provided for the return of light back to the source. So what was invented was a retro-reflective glass bead with a mirror finish on the back only. An innovation that increased reflectivity substantially. This took care of the issue with brightness and offset the other issues as well. But more work needed to be done. After brightening up the film, the issue of not reflecting when dirty or wet needed to be addressed. The beads needed to be protected, while still being allowed to reflect. To protect the beads, a very thin, clear layer of polymer was applied over the top of the film that sealed the beads without hindering reflectivity. This was tricky, but they figured it out. The clear layer kept the beads from accumulating dirt and also made the tape visible even in rain. Of note is that by tinting the top coat, it was discovered that different colors could be created. In 1939, 3M introduced engineer-grade reflective sheeting, the world's first reflective tape. The invention was filed with the Patent Office in 1941 and officially patented in 1943. The patent was titled Reflex Light Reflector. The new product was first used in trials in Minneapolis and then in the UK. After a short time and plenty of marketing, reflective signs made with 3M's new product took off. The film was easily die-cut into graphics, so creating letters was an easy task and very convenient for the industry. Engineer-grade films by 3M could be used for sign backgrounds and lettered on top with non-reflective material for contrast. Or letters could be cut from the material itself so that the letters or numbers were reflective on a non-reflective background. The former is most popular, but either way works. Later, when computer plotters were created, engineer-grade tapes would be perfect for creating all kinds of graphics, letters, and numbers. For over 2 decades, 3M's engineer-grade films and later their high-intensity sheeting dominated the industry. The inventions went through many improvements, and other similar reflective films were also created using the same glass bead technology. In any event, across the country and around the world, signs began to light up at night as this new and innovative film was adopted. In our next video, Part 3, we will cover the next generation of reflective films. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.